I'm granting Angela Sanders use of the house until the children graduate high school. Mr. Sanders will remain responsible for the mortgage and utility payments. Additionally, she will receive half the value of her husband's business. Ms. Sanders will retain her vehicle, with Mr. Sanders continuing to cover the payments. Furthermore, Mrs. Sanders will be awarded 60% of all assets, including bank accounts, investments, and retirement funds. Primary custody of the children is awarded to Mrs. Sanders, while Mr. Sanders will have visitation every other weekend and 2 consecutive weeks in the summer. Child support will be set at $750 per child, for a total of $1,500 per month. Given that Mrs. Sanders has been out of the workforce for 5 years, I am also awarding her spousal support of $2,000 per month. The divorce will be finalized in 90 days, unless Mr. Sanders withdraws his petition. With that, Judge Bethany Franklin brought the gavel down sharply, signaling the end of the proceedings. As she rose from her seat, I said one word that would completely alter the course of the next few months of my life. No. Judge Franklin paused mid-motion, her head snapping back toward me. Her expression shifted from surprise to disbelief, as though she couldn't fathom someone challenging her authority. Slowly, she lowered herself back into her chair, fixing me with a glare so piercing it could have frozen fire. "Excuse me?" she asked, her voice sharp. "Not sure what's unclear. Do you not understand the word no?" "I can clarify if needed," I replied, my tone even. Her eyes narrowed further. "You're testing my patience," she said, her voice carrying a warning. "And I've been waiting for this opportunity," I replied calmly, folding my arms. "You have 1 minute to apologize, or I'll hold you in contempt of court," she snapped. "At least that would be the first sensible ruling you've made today," I retorted. "This entire process is laughable." My lawyer leaned toward me, whispering urgently and shuffling papers in what seemed like a desperate attempt to find a way to salvage the situation. "In that case," she declared with a frosty smirk, 30 days in jail for contempt." I gave a quiet chuckle. "Well, at least that's consistent with the circus." My lawyer's face turned pale, and he muttered a plea for me to stop talking. "Make it 60 days, she fired back, her temper rising. I fixed her with a calm, unwavering stare. "You know, Your Honor," I said evenly, "if you could relax once in a while, you might be less uptight." Her face flushed crimson. 90 days, she growled through gritted teeth, the tension in the room so thick you could cut it with a knife. My lawyer's frantic gestures suggested he was ready to physically intervene, but by then, the damage was done. Judge Franklin's expression was one of controlled fury, and the gavel came down with a final thunderous strike. Luckily for my lawyer, that's when the bailiff stepped in and escorted me out. He looked so defeated, I almost felt bad for him. The courtroom was eerily silent, everyone staring in disbelief as I couldn't help myself. I started laughing. That might explain why psychologists decided to check on me during my stint in lockup over the following weeks. A letter from my lawyer's firm officially dropping me as a client arrived the very next day. No surprises there. Now, you're probably wondering how it all came to this. Let me give you some background. My name's Caleb Sanders. I'm 31, and I grew up in a typical middle-class family in the heartland of America. My upbringing was rooted in traditional values, knowing right from wrong, showing respect where it's earned, and honoring your commitments. A promise was sacred. You worked hard, shared what you had, and stood by your principles. It all came down to the golden rule. Treat others the way you want to be treated. But I've always believed there's a flip side. Treat people the way they treat you. Turning the other cheek? That's never really been my style. I've been called stubborn more times than I can count. Combine that with a strong sense of justice, and things can escalate quickly. If someone crossed me and I decided to take a stand, nothing could sway me. Take high school as an example. I was dating Hannah Evans at the time. We'd been together for a couple of months when we had one of those typical teenage arguments. I can't even remember what it was about now, but it ended with us breaking up. I put that in quotes because we both knew it wasn't the real deal. By Monday, we'd have made up, like always. But then Saturday night came around. I was walking past the local theater when I saw my cousin Owen escorting Hannah inside. Now, here's some context. Owen and I were inseparable growing up, practically like brothers. Same age, lived just a block apart. And I knew he had a thing for Hannah. He also knew we'd broken up, but that it wasn't permanent. Yet he decided to make a move anyway, which, in my book, is something you just don't do. From that night on, Owen was dead to me. When Hannah tried to talk to me on Monday, I ignored her completely. Owen approached me at church the next day, trying to justify himself, but I just walked away. When his family came over for Sunday dinner, I barely acknowledged his presence. Even when he tried to bond over video games, I left him to play alone. Our parents tried repeatedly to patch things up between us, but I wasn't interested. A year later, I got back at him by dating his girlfriend. When he confronted me, I didn't back down. We fought, and I won. Years later, he sent me an invite to his wedding, which I ignored. And when I married Angela, the whole family was invited, except Owen. So yes, I can hold a grudge, and I won't apologize for it. If someone wrongs me knowingly, I don't forgive easily. You might think that makes me petty, and that's fine. I believe in accountability. Actions have consequences. Don't make bad choices if you can't face the fallout. For example, if someone drives drunk and gets caught, they lose their license, pay the fine, and deal with the penalties, even if it costs them their job. I call it the stupid tax. Or if a teenager ends up pregnant because they didn't take precautions, then raising that child is their responsibility, not mine or anyone else's. I worked hard, followed the rules, and took ownership of my actions. That's how I was raised. In high school, I kept my grades up and earned scholarships to college. I balanced academics and a decent social life, staying in shape and occasionally catching the attention of women. Sure, I got into a few scrapes over my opinions, but I held my own. I graduated with a degree in economics and a minor in accounting, then went on to get my MBA. That landed me a solid job at a reputable company. Being single and free of major expenses, I started dabbling in the stock market. Turned out, I had a knack for it, and I did pretty well. It was a few months into that job when I met Angela at a party. We hit it off, I asked her out, and things progressed quickly. Angela's stunning. And I'm not just saying that as her husband. People notice her wherever we go. Friends used to joke about stealing her away if we ever broke up. Even some of my lesbian friends teased about trying to convert her. Eventually, I proposed, and she said yes. We got married. Angela had gone to college too, though I like to joke that she went for her MRS degree. For those who don't know, that's the playful term for women who go to college mainly to find a husband. She didn't land her MRS, but she did graduate with a degree in art history. Unfortunately, the job market wasn't exactly thriving for art historians, so she ended up working as a barista for a while. And yeah, I'll admit I've been a bit arrogant at times, but who isn't? Married life started off seamlessly. Just a week before the wedding, Angela decided to leave her job and fully embrace her role as a homemaker. Our relationship thrived in every way, including our intimacy, and we bought a charming 3-bedroom house together. My career was on the rise, and I was excelling in the stock market. We kept our spending modest, which allowed us to save significantly. Every bonus I received went straight into investments, and I maxed out my 401k contributions. My long-term goal was simple: retire by 40 and enjoy the good life. With my company recognizing my efforts through promotions and substantial bonuses, I was climbing the corporate ladder faster than I'd anticipated. A few years into our marriage, I came home one Friday evening to find Angela beaming with excitement, dressed to the nines. "Hurry up and get showered and changed. We're celebrating tonight, Daddy," she said with a mischievous grin. It took me a moment to process what she had just called me. We had been trying for a few months, but hearing her say it aloud caught me off guard. Overcome with joy, I picked her up and spun her around, kissing her face repeatedly. Knowing that our wild nights out would be limited once the baby arrived, we decided to make the most of that night and celebrate it in style. The following months were a whirlwind of excitement as we prepared for our new arrival. Then came the surprise that took everything to the next level. We weren't just having one baby, but twins. Both were girls. I was ecstatic, already picturing them as daddy's little girls wrapped around my fingers. Life felt perfect. When the big day arrived, we rushed to the hospital. Hours later, we welcomed 2 beautiful, healthy daughters into the world. They were perfect in every way, although they needed to stay in the hospital for a couple of extra days since they were twins. Once they were cleared to come home, both sides of our family were there to greet us. The joy was palpable. My mom in particular couldn't take her eyes off them. She had waited years to become a grandmother, and now her dream had come true. Life shifted dramatically after the twins were born. I realized that my demanding corporate job was keeping me away from the family moments I didn't want to miss. With a comfortable amount of savings and a strong investment portfolio, I decided to take a leap of faith and start my own company. Leveraging my success in the stock market, I got licensed and opened an investment firm. Friends and family members I had already been helping became my first official clients, which helped the business gain traction. Within a year, I had a solid client base, and word of mouth brought even more referrals. Former colleagues trusted me with their portfolios, and their friends soon followed. Life seemed to be going exactly as planned. But as they say, when you're on top, the only direction left is down. It was the twins' second birthday, and we went all out with a massive party, complete with decorations, gifts, and plenty of photos and videos to share with them when they were older. Both sides of the family attended, and everyone was having a wonderful time. While the celebration carried on, I stepped into the bedroom to use the ensuite bathroom since the hallway one was occupied. As I came out, I overheard my mom talking to her sister in hushed tones in the hallway. "I just can't figure out where those blue eyes came from," my mom said, her voice low. "Have you asked Michael about it?" my aunt replied cautiously. "Oh no, I could never bring it up. He's so happy. If he found out they weren't his, it would destroy him." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I froze. Silently, I stepped back into the bathroom and locked the door. My thoughts were racing. They had to be mine, right? Surely there was someone in the family with blue eyes. I mentally scanned through every relative I could think of. My eyes were a dull brown, and Angela's were hazel. The only family member I could recall with non-brown eyes was my cousin Mary, and her green eyes came from her father's side, not a biological connection. Angela's family offered no answers either. None of them had blue eyes. I stayed in the bathroom for a while, trying to calm myself down. Eventually, I pulled myself together enough to rejoin the party without raising any suspicion. It wasn't easy, but I played the part expected of me, all the while trying to figure out my next steps. That evening, after everyone left and the girls were tucked into bed, I studied their faces closely. I could see Angela's features in them, but others didn't seem to match mine, or anyone in my family. The next day, while Angela napped with the twins, I sat down at my computer. Using a company credit card to avoid raising questions, I ordered supplies for my office. I also began researching private investigation firms in the area. The idea that Angela might have been unfaithful nearly 3 years ago was becoming harder to ignore. And if she had cheated, who's to say it wasn't still happening? I needed answers. A few days later, the supplies arrived, and I'd hired a firm called Pro Investigations. I provided them with all the information they needed to monitor Angela's devices, her phone, tablet, and laptop. At the same time, I began making financial moves. If everything turned out to be a misunderstanding and the girls were mine, no harm done. But if my suspicions were correct, I wasn't about to let Angela benefit from my hard work. I wasn't going to foot the bill for her mistakes, and I certainly wouldn't support someone else's children. Yes, the girls were innocent in all of this, but so was I. If Angela had betrayed me, the consequences were hers to face, not mine. There were no concrete plans yet, but a sense of inevitability loomed. 2 weeks later, a letter arrived at my office. I locked the door, ensuring complete privacy before opening it. The contents hit me like a freight train. The children weren't mine. Though I had suspected this, I had clung to the faint hope that I was wrong. For an hour, I sat there, overwhelmed, as the tears came and went. The next day, I met with my private investigator. What he presented was undeniable. The man Angela had been seeing was her personal trainer, a blonde-haired, blue-eyed fitness instructor she visited multiple times a week. Worse still, she had taken our daughters to his apartment so he could spend time with his biological children. Audio recordings confirmed they both openly acknowledged his paternity. Any lingering doubts I had vanished. Knowing what needed to be done, I arranged a meeting with a divorce lawyer the following afternoon. I wasn't naive. I fully expected a legal battle that would test my patience and dignity. The lawyer offered his advice, which I dismissed almost immediately. When he explained the potential legal implications, I countered with my terms. Angela and her partner could assume full responsibility for the children, both emotionally and financially. There would be no involvement from me, neither as a caregiver nor as a provider. The lawyer stressed the importance of protecting the children's well-being, and I agreed, but on my terms. I left the office after instructing him to draft the paperwork but not file it until I gave the green light. Of course, I might have misled him into thinking I was still open to reconciliation. All right, let's be honest. Now, that was a blatant lie. Over the next 2 months, I worked to finalize everything quietly. Angela remained blissfully unaware of the storm brewing beneath the surface. My years ago stint in a junior year drama class had paid off. My acting was flawless. Officially, I now had no income and no assets to my name. On paper, all I owned was an encumbered house and an old Chevy pickup. The house, refinanced under the guise of recent improvements, carried a hefty mortgage and wouldn't even cover brokerage fees if sold. The Lexus I drove? That was a company property, not mine. I had also set aside $10,000 in cash, enough to keep me afloat for a while. The weekend when my cousin Owen and his wife Hannah visited was when things took an unexpected turn for Angela. I casually explained to her that Owen and Hannah had dropped by my office weeks earlier. After some heartfelt conversations, they had admitted their past mistakes and apologized sincerely. I chose to forgive them, I told her. People are so quick to believe what they hear, aren't they? Yes, Owen and Hannah did visit, and yes, they apologized. Every word of that is true. I pride myself on being honest, after all. I forgave them and welcomed them back into my life. But, as with many stories, a few minor details, purely coincidental, might have been overlooked. Hannah's family, for example, includes a few individuals who are known for their more colorful approach to resolving disputes. Some are the kind of people you wouldn't want to cross, intimidating with a history of the occasional bar fight. There are rumors, unsubstantiated of course, that a handful of them work as problem solvers for some questionable local businesses. But I'm not one for gossip. In a completely unrelated turn of events, local news recently reported an assault involving a personal trainer from a nearby gym. According to the story, he was attacked by 5 men as he left work one evening. He foolishly tried to fight back but was overpowered. The assailants made off with his wallet, car, and clothing, leaving him badly injured. He sustained multiple fractures and was expected to remain hospitalized for weeks. The local crime situation was becoming increasingly troubling, with the police unable to identify any suspects in a recent mugging. The attackers had been meticulous, wearing dark clothing, gloves, and ski masks to avoid detection. The victim, a blonde-haired, blue-eyed man, was expected to recover after extensive reconstructive surgery and physical therapy, though doctors noted it was unlikely he would regain full physical function in certain areas. For about a week after the incident, Angela seemed unusually downcast and withdrawn. I assumed she was on edge about the rising crime in the area. I even offered to enhance our home's security, but my suggestions didn't seem to ease her nerves. By Monday morning, I contacted my lawyer to finalize and file the divorce paperwork, ensuring Angela would be served by late Friday afternoon. Despite his repeated attempts to steer me toward a different approach, I stood firm. By Tuesday, the documents were ready for my signature. I met with my lawyer to finalize everything, dismissing his concerns with a polite nod. I handed over the house and the investments as part of the settlement. Of course, the investment accounts were empty. It was easy to give her 100% of nothing. The house, along with the mortgage and utility payments, was now her responsibility. Angela remained blissfully unaware that I had been gradually moving my tools and personal belongings out of the garage. Most of the larger items had been relocated to Owen and Hannah's ranch, while smaller valuables had been stashed in a one-bedroom apartment owned by an offshore LLC with deliberately opaque ownership. Friday morning arrived at last. I went to work as usual, appearing calm and composed. Earlier in the week, Owen had helped me move my truck to the office. After dropping off my car there, I drove the truck to the bank, where I withdrew nearly everything from my accounts, leaving behind just $100. I also emptied the safety deposit box, transferring the contents to the ranch. It was critical to keep these assets out of sight and beyond reach. Now, you might wonder why I trusted Owen and Hannah after our past falling out. The answer was simple. Family ties ran deep in our family, and betrayal wasn't taken lightly. Owen and I had rebuilt our bond, and the mortgage on their ranch, held by an offshore LLC, only strengthened that trust. We both understood loyalty in ways that extended beyond words. Later that morning, I parked my truck a few blocks from the house and checked the GPS tracker I had placed on Angela's car. As expected, she was at the mall. Wasting no time, I parked in the driveway, collected the last of my belongings from the garage, and loaded them into the truck. Over the past few days, I had meticulously packed my things, so it was just a matter of grabbing the boxes and suitcases. Clothes were carried out in armfuls, hangers and all, as I cleared out my closet and dresser. I didn't bother closing the garage or locking the front door. Angela's timing was impeccable. My phone rang as I was leaving, likely her panicked call after discovering her credit cards no longer worked. A quick check of the GPS showed she was heading home. Laughing to myself, I left the phone on the kitchen table and drove away, knowing she would find nothing but emptiness. Once at my new apartment, I unloaded everything efficiently and cracked open 3 beers to celebrate. As I sank into my recliner, my new cell phone rang. Only a few people had the number, and Angela wasn't one of them. "Hello?" I answered. "She's been served. You should have the video shortly," the voice on the other end informed me. "Got it, thanks," I replied before ending the call. 15 minutes later, the video arrived via email. Angela's reaction was clear: shock, disbelief, and eventual collapse onto the floor. The server ensured she wasn't hurt before leaving, capturing everything on video. The footage cut off shortly after, leaving me curious about how she would process the divorce papers and the accompanying DNA and video evidence of her infidelity. From that point on, the legal proceedings moved at a slow and deliberate pace. Angela made several attempts to contact me, including calling my old office repeatedly, unable to believe I had resigned 2 weeks earlier. Her eventual in-person visit to the office escalated quickly, leading to such a disturbance that the police had to intervene and escort her off the premises. Owen called me a couple of times, letting me know that Angela had been pestering him, trying to track me down. She had likely started connecting the dots. His sudden reappearance in my life and the timing of our divorce couldn't have been mere coincidence. Eventually, restraining orders were issued against her on behalf of both Owen and my former company, forcing her to back off. 2 weeks later, my lawyer reached out to check if she had secured legal representation, only to learn that she hadn't. With her funds dwindling rapidly, Angela was down to whatever cash she had in her purse and the $200 I'd left in our accounts. The financial strain was becoming evident as she began leaning on her parents for support. Meanwhile, I was in full relaxation mode, deliberately avoiding any new projects to ensure she couldn't lay claim to anything else. Eventually, Angela managed to hire a lawyer, and meetings were scheduled. I refused to attend in person, instead relaying clear instructions to my lawyer. I wouldn't be giving her another penny. Reports from the discussions indicated tensions were running high, culminating in a push for arbitration. My presence was required there, but things unraveled almost immediately. "Where's all the money?" Angela demanded, glaring at me. "What money?" I replied with a calm shrug. "All our money," she insisted, her voice rising. "We don't have any. We're broke." "I'm living in the cheapest one-bedroom apartment I could find," I said casually. That part wasn't entirely a lie. The rent was low because I had a connection with the real owner of the complex. "Our investments, checking, savings, they're all gone," she accused, her frustration boiling over. "I made a really bad investment," I replied dryly. "Does a cheating wife count? Lost it all." While not the whole truth, it wasn't entirely false either. The money was now well hidden, scattered across offshore accounts and aliases. My lawyer interjected with a weary tone. "She's being given the house, and her name is already on the title." He could have sounded more assertive, but instead he resembled someone surveying the aftermath of a natural disaster, trying to find a silver lining in the rubble. "It's mortgaged to the hilt. I can't afford the payments," Angela yelled, her frustration bubbling over. The conversation spiraled downhill from there. Child support? Not my kids, not my responsibility. Spousal maintenance? No job, no income, no obligation. She demanded 70% of the liquid assets, an exercise in futility since nothing remained to be found. 50% of the business? Good luck with that. 50% of the retirement? What part of lost it all was unclear? Unsurprisingly, arbitration fell apart, leading us straight to court. Predictably, the proceedings landed under the sharp eye of Judge Bethany Franklin, a figure notorious for her strong biases against men, particularly those involved in infidelity cases. If the roles had been reversed and I had cheated, I knew her verdict would have been ruthless. With her presiding, my chances of a favorable outcome were slim at best. Now, you might think I was foolishly banking on convincing the court of our financial destitution. You'd be wrong. I fully expected them to dig into financial records from months prior, uncovering what had been there. The real challenge was ensuring they couldn't touch what was no longer accessible. That required time to move funds through layers of accounts, often withdrawing cash from one bank and depositing it into several others under different aliases. Hannah's family, ever resourceful, had a side hustle creating high-quality, entertainment purposes only fake IDs. Their craftsmanship was impressive, with only a small disclaimer marking them as inauthentic. For a little extra, that disclaimer could conveniently be omitted. At one point, I even had an ID naming me as Jesus Christ, which turned into a running joke. Whenever someone shouted, "Jesus Christ!" in frustration, I'd whip out the ID for comedic effect. Those IDs weren't just for laughs. They were part of the meticulous groundwork I'd laid to ensure I stayed one step ahead. I transferred the funds electronically, strategically splitting them across multiple accounts. The trail was designed to be complex and nearly impossible to follow without investing significant time and resources, likely taking months or even years. By the time anyone unraveled it, I planned to be far out of reach. Back in court, I stood before the stern judge again. My initial 60 days in county jail were nearly over, leaving me with 30 more to serve from my original 90-day sentence. "Well," she began, her voice dripping with condescension, "have you learned your lesson?" "If you're referring to the lesson about not marrying someone unfaithful, I learned that long before stepping into this courtroom," I replied calmly. "I'm talking about your behavior in my court," she snapped, her irritation unmistakable. A vein on her forehead pulsed visibly. "With all due respect, Your Honor, I didn't think my attitude needed much adjustment, considering how I was railroaded into this situation," I said with deliberate composure. Her face reddened, and I wondered if she was keeping her blood pressure in check. "I could extend your sentence, you know," she said sharply. "Let me remind you, you still haven't made any child support or maintenance payments. Where's your lawyer?" "Let me break it down for you," I said, trying not to sound too amused. "I'm in jail. That means no access to my funds. Because of your ruling, I can't make payments. Perhaps you've inadvertently made yourself part of the problem." Her response was swift and punitive. She added another 30 days to my sentence for a total of 90 additional days, 30 for each exchange. Despite her attempts to make life unbearable, jail wasn't so bad. The food was mediocre, but edible. I had a place to sleep and time to focus on exercise and unwinding. My courtroom antics earned me some recognition, and I found unlikely allies inside. Even Hannah's family connections proved advantageous in the strangest ways. There was one hiccup, though. Angela's cousin, who wasn't exactly the sharpest tool in the shed, decided to land himself in jail, supposedly to teach me a lesson. Word of his intentions spread fast. Before he even reached the yard, he experienced a series of unfortunate accidents. A rogue football to the face here, a mistimed basketball pass there. Pure coincidences, of course. Still determined, he finally approached me, ready to throw a sucker punch. Anticipating his move, I spun around and delivered a clean kick to his stomach, stopping him cold. After that, he spent most of his time in the infirmary before retreating to his cell for the remainder of his stay. Eventually, I found myself back in court, facing the same uncompromising judge. "Are you ready to apologize for your conduct?" she asked, clearly expecting submission. "I'm unaware of any misconduct warranting an apology," I said matter-of-factly. "Perhaps showing some respect could lead to a shorter stay," she suggested. "So a different judge will be taking over?" I quipped. Her frustration reached a boiling point. "You're testing my patience." "Should I start stomping my feet for dramatic effect?" I mused aloud, earning a glare so sharp it could cut steel. I considered suggesting she have medical staff on standby for a stress-related episode, but wisely kept it to myself. You still haven't made child support or maintenance payments, nor have the mortgage or utilities been addressed," she said, her tone accusing. "We've been over this," I replied, keeping my voice level. "Being in jail limits my ability to earn or access money. And let's not forget, those children aren't biologically mine. As for my ex-wife, she should be more than capable of supporting herself, especially after receiving a significant share of my business." At that moment, Angela's lawyer stood up. "Your Honor, Mr. Sanders sold his business to an overseas firm 2 months before filing for divorce. We've been unable to trace the new owners for compliance with the court's order." Before the judge could respond, an elegant woman rose from the gallery and approached the bench. "Your Honor, I represent the board of the purchasing firm. I request the court dismiss any ruling awarding Mrs. Sanders' ownership of the business, as it was sold before the divorce was filed. Therefore, any claim she has is invalid." "But what about the money from the sale?" Angela blurted out, visibly panicked. "The transfer of ownership and payments took place overseas," the representative explained. "I don't have specific details, but the funds from the sale never entered U.S. jurisdiction. Any claims would need to be addressed with your ex-husband, potentially in the country where the money is currently held." "And which country might that be?" Angela's lawyer asked, pressing for more information. "The transaction initially occurred in Belgium," she replied, "but from what I understand, the money was transferred elsewhere shortly after. I don't know its current location." Angela's lawyer turned to the judge. "Your Honor, my client is in a desperate situation. The mortgage hasn't been paid for 3 months, and the house is nearing foreclosure. Utility companies are threatening to cut off services. Her parents, who had been assisting her, are financially overextended. She's taken a job as a waitress, but it's not enough to cover the expenses." The judge's eyes locked on me. "Mr. Sanders, you have 1 week to bring all payments up to date." I couldn't help the sarcasm in my voice. "Oh, absolutely, Your Honor. Let me just pull some cash out of thin air." "Oh, wait, nothing there. As I've repeatedly stated, I'm incarcerated and have no access to funds. Your rulings ensure I can't earn money to comply with these demands. Feel free to ask the guards. They search my cell often enough to confirm there's no hidden stash." Her tone sharpened. "Mr. Sanders, I admonish you. Your lawyer can access your accounts and transfer the funds." I raised an eyebrow. "As you can see, I no longer have legal representation. And what accounts are you referring to? If such accounts exist, I'd be delighted for someone to enlighten me with their details. I've consistently said I'm broke, yet this court refuses to accept that reality. Even if I had accounts, how would I access them without financial records? But let's save time. I don't have accounts." The judge's glare deepened. "What about your checking, savings, or investment accounts?" I sighed. "A series of bad investments wiped them out, as I've explained before." "And the proceeds from the company sale?" she pressed. "The company struggled because of those same investments. I sold it at a loss and used the little I earned to cover outstanding debts. There's nothing left." She leaned forward. "Mr. Sanders, do you expect this court to believe that?" I shrugged, my patience wearing thin. "Your Honor, believe what you like. If you're so sure I'm hiding money, produce the account details to prove it. Otherwise, it seems like someone is trying to shift financial blame onto me while conveniently ignoring their own choices, including their extracurricular activities." "That's absurd," Angela's lawyer interrupted. I shot back. "About as absurd as locking me up and expecting me to generate payments without a means to earn." The judge's voice grew cold. "Mr. Sanders, I can extend your incarceration until you pay?" I gave her a disbelieving look. "Of course, because imprisoning me longer is the perfect way to make an impossible demand magically achievable." 3 more months passed. Angela's house was foreclosed, and her Lexus was repossessed for missed payments. She moved in with her parents, unable to afford an apartment for herself and the children. Working part-time at a diner barely covered her day-to-day expenses. Her lover, discharged and now swimming in medical debt, faced financial ruin. His credit was so poor he couldn't qualify for new cards. Eventually, Angela and her lawyer petitioned the court for my release, arguing that I needed to work to provide financial support. With a new lawyer advocating on my behalf, I negotiated terms for my release under strict conditions. I was labeled a flight risk, suspected of hoarding hidden money, and barred from leaving the state without supervision or a passport. I found work at a local Taco Bell, earning a modest wage while staying at Owen and Hannah's ranch. The surveillance was obvious. Agents observed me from the road, hoping to catch me slipping up. What they didn't realize was that most of my money was already secure, far beyond their reach. For 3 months, I worked tirelessly at Taco Bell. Angela, armed with a court order, garnished my minimum wage earnings, but her take was minimal. During this time, I refined my plans. Owen had cleared out my apartment while I was incarcerated, distributing my belongings among extended family. Recently, several packages from my family were shipped to the same destination. We often hosted barbecues with Hannah's relatives and my family visiting. Surveillance agents, ever watchful, failed to notice visitors discreetly collecting packages from the backyard sheds. These were repacked and sent off over the following weeks, undetected by anyone keeping tabs on me. I kept a low profile, sticking to work or the ranch. Angela's increasingly disruptive behavior at Taco Bell led the restaurant to file a restraining order against her. Her demands for money caused constant disturbances, but generous tips to my manager ensured I kept my job. My lawyer, a sharp and relentless advocate, handled all legal matters from the ranch. Stella, who had once represented the company that purchased my firm, now worked exclusively for me. Beyond her professional prowess, our relationship became more personal. While some might raise eyebrows at such a dynamic, I saw no contradiction. Lawyers often live in a world where pragmatism eclipses convention. Now, as for the money, yes, I sold my business outright, ensuring Angela had no legal claim to it. By conducting the sale overseas, I placed the funds beyond U.S. jurisdiction. Angela could only access them if I brought the money back into the States, a scenario that wasn't happening. The sale netted a substantial amount. My overseas accounts held $10 million, while $200,000 in cash was stored in safes and domestic accounts. Much of that had been allocated for my plans, leaving $150,000 at my disposal, but none of it would follow me directly. On a sunny Saturday afternoon, we hosted another family barbecue. Preparations were complete, and Owen and I manned the grill and smoker. Stella was among the guests, mingling with others. At one point, Hannah's uncle handed me an envelope as thanks for helping him out, which I passed along to Stella for safekeeping. That evening, I made an announcement. Owen and Hannah now fully own their ranch, as the lien holder declared the mortgage paid in full. Cheers erupted, and the celebration carried on late into the night. When the festivities wound down, Stella left for her flight from a neighboring state's airport. Her earlier packing raised no suspicions, and no one noticed a man exiting her car in the parking garage or casually walking behind her to the international terminal. Caleb Sanders couldn't leave the country without a passport, but Matthew Thompson encountered no such obstacles. In first class en route to Mexico City, no one batted an eye as Stella Taylor became Victoria Thompson. Together, they boarded a connecting flight to Ecuador, slipping out of sight with ease. Meanwhile, 2 days later, Matthew and Victoria Thompson arrived at their Costa Rican hacienda. Waiting for them was an old Chevy truck that bore a striking resemblance to one previously parked at Owen and Hannah's ranch. Back in the States, the fallout began. 2 weeks after the barbecue, a bench warrant was issued for Caleb Sanders, who had disappeared without a trace. Owen and Hannah's high-powered lawyer argued they bore no responsibility for his sudden departure, even pursuing back rent. Their explanation? Caleb left one day in his pickup, leaving no forwarding information. While some doubts lingered, no evidence contradicted their account. Years passed, and Matthew Thompson flourished in his new life. He ran a successful charter fishing service, while Victoria managed a cantina. Their wealth afforded them a comfortable lifestyle in the village, where they owned one of the most luxurious haciendas. Known for their generosity, they supported community projects and provided for neighbors in need. Matthew found time to play the stock market, offering investment guidance and setting up accounts for locals. Life in Costa Rica was simple yet fulfilling, a far cry from the chaos left behind. As for Judge Bethany Franklin, I couldn't help but smirk when I eventually heard about her downfall. Known for her rigid demeanor and sharp tongue, she became embroiled in her own scandal. Though she identified as a lesbian, it was revealed she had been cheating on her wife with a man. The fallout was swift. Her now ex-wife, who had adopted 3 children with Franklin, secured child support and maintenance payments, along with the mortgage for their home. Adding insult to injury, the ex-wife soon moved her boyfriend into the house, publicly flaunting their relationship. Rumors swirled that they planned to marry a week after their youngest child's college graduation, coincidentally aligning with the end of Franklin's financial obligations. Poetic, isn't it?